This is a Media Lab podcast. Welcome to Putting It Together, the podcast that goes through the entire body of work of Stephen Sondheim, show by show and song by song. My name is Kyle Marshall, your self-described Sondheim expert. I have to say that By the Sea is probably one of my favorite songs from the score of Sweeney Todd. Maybe it wouldn't hit my top 5 or anything like that, but for me, if it ever does come up on my shuffle, it's a song that I can't really skip. Especially in that original Broadway cast with Angela Lansbury and her kisses and the other kind of percussive elements of her performance. I have always loved this song. Sure, does it really advance the plot all that much? No, but I always find it essential. I'm so glad that Michael Price has returned back to the show. He'll introduce himself a little bit more when we hit into the episode itself. I will just give a little programming note here that I mentioned how it is a rumor that Into the Woods is going to transfer to Broadway. Well, we now know that that is an actual thing that is happening. And if there is any way that I can afford to get back to New York City so that I can watch it, I will move mountains in order to do so. My gut feeling is that, unfortunately, it's going to be another one of those productions I have to read about on Twitter rather than actually experience for myself. But we shall see. We shall see. Regardless, let's jump right into this episode about By the Sea.
Oh, Mr. Todd, I'm so happy I could eat you up, I really could. You know what I'd like to do, Mr. Todd, what I dream, if the business stays as good, where I really like to go in a year or so.
Mike Price, thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm so happy to be back. Such a thrill and a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the last time you were on, I was going to check this and now I've forgotten. I think it was maybe a couple years ago, a year ago. I don't know what time is anymore. Of, talking about the song that supposedly Sondheim wrote for The Simpsons for kind of an April Fool's Day episode, but you've now come back for an actual, I guess, episode.
Yes.
To talk about a show that I know you deeply love, Sweeney Todd. So I think people can go back and listen to that episode if they want to do the nitty gritty, but maybe just to reiterate, why is Sweeney Todd such a special show for you?
Wow. Well, I mean, the first Sondheim show that I saw on Broadway in its original cast. I'm going to date myself as an older fellow, but I saw not the super original cast because Victor Garber fairly early in the run, and I don't know why that was, but I saw it it opened in March of 1979, and I saw it with a bunch of my college friends, I believe around early to mid-November of 1979. So its original run at the Uris Theater, which is now the Gershwin Theater. And Anthony was played by a guy named Chris Groendahl, who replaced Victor Garber. But every other way, it was Len Carrier, Angela Lansbury, the whole gang. And it just blew me away. Still to this day, how many years ago that was, 43 almost years ago, just the greatest experience in a theater I've ever had. And then I got the cast album for Christmas that year and listened to it over and over and over again. And just ever since have just devoured it and loved it.
I mean, it's one of those things. So often people ask, if you had a time machine, what show would you go back and watch in its original Broadway run? And it's always hard because there's so many shows I would like, but Sweeney Todd is high up there for me. Like, I just would love to have seen what that original production felt like, and be kind of in that crowd when there's the grave diggers and the set rattles when he slams the door. It's like, oh my gosh, this is something different.
Yeah, it was magnificent. And I hadn't been to a whole lot of Broadway shows by that point in my life. I'd been to a few, but nothing as grandiose as that. And, just unbelievable. And that massive set, that foundry that they brought in, all the mechanical contraptions of it, and the pipe organ, and like you said, there's that amazing thing at the beginning where they're digging the grave, and you see the guys digging the grave, and they're slowly going down, and then Sweeney rose from the grave, and I was absolutely just knocked out by it.
Now, this song in particular, of course, the main singer in this is Mrs. Lovett, portrayed by Angela Lansbury in the original production. Because you are like a television writer, screenwriter, I don't know how to quite ask this, but have you ever tried or wanted to create a character like a Mrs. Lovett, who is both scary but funny at the same time?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, what a character. What an amazing character. What a great I've seen it 3 times. Well, I saw a fourth. I've seen it 3 times in New York with Angela Lansbury, and then again I saw it in 1989 with, her name was Beth. So I'm so sorry, I remember who played it with the.
That wasn't Beth Howell,
Beth
was it?
Howland. Beth Howell. I mean, she
Howland,
played it
sorry, yeah.
with Bob Gunton in the Circle in the Square production in 1989. She was great, and then I saw it with Patti LuPone and Michael Cerveris, the John Doyle super stripped down production. So it's such an amazing character. I've never had a chance to create a character exactly like that on both The Simpsons, and I have a show on Netflix called F is for Family, where we have some characters that are mixtures of funny and dark. And the closest I guess we came to that was a character I had in F is for Family who was a rich woman who owned a kind of a Tupperware company named Henrietta Van Horn, who was played by the amazing Allison Janney. So that was a great character. So yeah. But nothing that could touch Mrs. Lovett.
For this song in particular, By the Sea, I know we're throwing our kind of memories back in time. Can you recall what it was like seeing that for the first time at all?
Honestly, I went through my memory banks of it. I think I'm sure I enjoyed it. I don't have a vivid memory of that particular number. And it'd be so overshadowed, of course, by blood spurting and throat being cut and everything else. And it comes right after my favorite number in the whole show, which is the third or fourth, whatever version of Joanna, where Sweeney is singing and he's slitting people's throats and the contraption is working. And then Anthony's running around and the beggar woman. And it's just so amazing. And that's the one if you said like, I can only listen to one number from Sweeney Todd, that's the one I would put on because it's so beautiful and dark. And it just sums everything up about the show. So then I was thinking about this today. Is this By the Sea? It's such a sweet little song. It's a cute little comedy number, like a little, whatever you'd call it, diversion. And I often wonder, like it's certainly overshadowed by what comes before it, and then certainly then what comes after it, which is right after this is the whole, more or less the whole end of the show. Everything from the letter that Sweeney writes to
the Wigmaker
the lunatics running around kind of and the whole final number. That I think it's piece in the show is sort of just to give the audience just one last smile before all hell breaks loose.
I agree. I think it's like this one little taste of levity before like things are going to get real dark now.
Yeah. And it's really the last moment of lightness for Mrs. Lovett. I mean, what's fun about it, of course, too, is that Sweeney is still obsessed with the judge and the Beatle, and he's sitting there working on his pipe and everything and talking about when is the Beatle coming. And she's in her usual mode of like, oh, no, just think about nice things. But I think that's part of why it's there. Because it's one of the few songs I'd say in the show that doesn't really advance the story in any way. It's only like a character moment. Yeah. It's just her saying, let's have fun. And I mean, she has plans for the future and she wants to marry him. And she's not certainly thinking about the judge anymore. But he is. It's
in the way I was thinking about this is it's kind of like her I Want song, and that like this is what I'm dreaming of, this is what my perfect future is going to be. And I think we keep talking about it this season, at least for me, what your first viewing is like of this show versus the second viewing when you kind of know how everything is going to end. Because I think for so many people she's still kind of that daffy woman that's going through the show, and so like her idea of like this is what the future is going to be like, well, I'm still holding on to this secret and preventing Sweeney from really fulfilling his goal. Like that's really fascinating to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's for sure. Because she has the big secret, of course, that she's holding on to. And then she thinks that she's got everything. And it is like what she wants, but in a way she's got what she wants now because she's successful and rich and, well-to-do. And she got her new harmonium and the new wallpaper and, and things are doing well. But she still wants him, to give her his full attention, which he doesn't still. And there's that moment that's in the book of it after it's over where she more or less forces him to kiss her. And if you watch it on YouTube, you can see parts of it. There's that moment where she more or less forces him to do it. And then she's like, oh, I know you love me. But it's clear that he's still, his mind is a million miles away.
Not in it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. It's still as slight as it is. And it's funny because I have the 2 books that Sondheim wrote, Finishing the Hat books. And I look through them again when I know it's me talking about the song, and there's nothing about the song in either of the books. I know. So I think that he certainly didn't give it the weight that the other numbers in Sweeney Todd have. it's still for all that, it's still an amazingly wonderful song full of great stuff.
One last thing here before we get into the lyrics of the song itself. The three versions that we're kind of looking at here this season, of course, are the original version with Angela Lansbury, the film version with Helena Bonham Carter, and then, yes, the stripped down version with Patti LuPone. Have you had a chance to meet any one of those three ladies?
Well, I have not met Patti LuPone, but she was, I was instrumental in getting her to be a guest voice on F is for Family.
Okay.
Yes. So I got to meet her the way I'm talking to you right now over Zoom at a recording studio. And she was just wonderful and fantastic. And so she did her part. She recorded her part for us just about a year ago right now. She did two different sessions, one around a year ago now, and the last one was probably around September or so of last year. She was great. And of course, I mean, I told her, oh my God, I saw you in Sweeney Todd, I saw you in this, I saw you in that. I've seen her in a bunch of different things. She couldn't be nicer and just very, very sweet. And I was going to be in New York at Christmas time. We had plans to go to New York at Christmas time, and I was going to go see Company. And I had written to her and I said, I'd love to meet you. And she was like, oh, yes, you must come backstage afterwards. And I was so excited. And then we ended up not going because of COVID, Omicron coming through. And then as it turned out, the week we were going to be there was one of the weeks that she missed anyway, because of what was going on with the company. So I still hope to get out there. I'm sure it'll be running through the Tony Awards. I hope it keeps running past into the summer, because I hope to be out in New York again in July. And if so, I'll go see it then.
I did get to go and see it, of course, when I was in New York here a couple of weeks ago. So it is a very, very good production. I was really happy with how they designed it and everything. And now I might have to do another trip, because I hear rumors that the 2-week Into the Woods engagement might be transferring to Broadway. And they might be doing a new revival of Sweeney Todd. These are all rumors. These are not
a new revival of Sweeney Todd. Yeah. Oh my God, that would be great. Yeah. Like a Broadway revival.
That's what I've been hearing.
That's what they need to do next, because now they've literally done it as small as it can possibly be done. Each one keeps getting smaller and smaller to do that one at the pie shop. Now this next one should be just completely blown out, big time Broadway with the full orchestra again. I hope they do that.
Hi everyone, just Kyle breaking into the conversation to tell you about some of the people and organizations that help this show continue to go. First and foremost, if you would like to help support the show for absolutely free, you can of course do so by giving a rating and review on whatever app you listen to podcasts in. That's of course greatly appreciated. And if you'd like to help monetarily, which will only help to grow and make this show better, you can do so over at our Patreon page. Please do not donate if it impacts you negatively financially. I also need to give a huge thank you to the God That's Good tier from Patreon. That's Jack, Todd, Carrie, Louise, Christopher, and Steven. Putting together as a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported, the Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. This episode of Putting It Together is brought to you by Alberta Blue Cross. Alberta Blue Cross understands that running a small business is tough, and they understand that business owners in Alberta are busy. Now, Alberta Blue Cross give you peace of mind with a group benefits plan. They offer health, dental, life, and disability coverage for your employees. Alberta Blue Cross group benefit plans are easy to manage, anywhere, anytime, and on any device, making it easy for you and your employees to access. To learn more and explore your options, head over to ab.bluecross.ca. This episode is also brought to you by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider in Alberta, offering internet, electricity, and natural gas with low rates, awesome service, and profit sharing with local charities. In Alberta, you do get to choose who to buy your internet, electricity, and natural gas from. If you choose Park Power, you are choosing a positive local business. Plus, Park Power shares its profits with local not-for-profits that are working to make a difference for their communities. Shopping local is very important to Park Power's owner, Chris Kozowski, and we love local here at the Alberta Podcast Network, so it's a great fit. Learn more at parkpower.ca. We can jump into the lyrics here then. This is, of course, like as you mentioned, right after that third Joanna is sung in the score, we come back and see basically Sweeney brooding away in a chair, and Mrs. Lovett is kind of flitting around the stage, and she starts into this song by saying, "Ooh, Mr. Todd, I'm so happy. I could eat you up, I really could. You know what I'd like to do, Mr. Todd? What I dream. If the business stays as good, where I'd really like to go in a year or so. Don't you want to know? Of course. Do you really want to know? Yes, I do. I do."
Ooh, Mr. Todd, I'm so happy I could eat you up, I really could. You know what I'd like to do, Mr. Todd, what I dream. If the business stays as good, where I'd really like to go in a year or so. Don't you want to know?
Yes, of course.
Do you really want to know?
Yes, I do. I do.
Always had a dream.
I don't think he really does, but we'll put that on the back burner for a second. Anything you want to say about this opening bit?
It's just so sweet and wonderful and funny, and it just sets up the dynamic of the song completely. I will say one thing that I think that's really interesting. You mentioned earlier too, that when you first see it, hopefully, you're coming to this. Let's say, imagine you're coming to the show cold. You don't know where it's going to end, how it's going to end. The difference between seeing it then and then hearing it again after you know what's going on is that the song, I feel, and as we go through all the verses, it's full of all these little things that are just very slight foreshadowings of things.
Yes.
Like she talks about the future and a year or so from now, and when you see it the second time, you realize you only have about, I don't know, a few hours left. I forgot how much longer it is. It's only about 35 minutes on stage, but in terms of real life, it's only about a day or so. So that's what's so great about it. I think that it works on both levels. It's just as a sweet little fun song. It's very sweet, and the little kissing is fun. And again, I highly recommend, if anyone hasn't seen it yet on YouTube, there's a, maybe you've already spoken about this, but there is a complete videotape of the whole production from 1979 on YouTube that's shot from like a balcony somewhere, and it's not great. I mean, it's kind of fuzzy and everything, but you can see it. You can see it. I prefer that even to the George Hearn, the nicely made one for Showtime. I prefer that to that because I was not a big fan of George Hearn. Len Carrier is the only Sweeney for me.
It's so interesting how you can get so ingrained in your head about performances, because I'm a very similar way where usually I'm such a big fan of like original Broadway casts that when someone tries to do something new, it's like, oh, that's cool, you tried something new, but I do prefer the first way that it was done. Yeah. It takes a lot for me to be like, actually, no, this was actually a better way to approach this. So I always hear Len Carrier in my head when I'm thinking about Sweeney Todd.
But if you see it, you can see the way she's kissing him on the cheek, and it's funny and gets laughs, and it's just a great way to set the song up.
Yeah, especially with Mrs. Lovett. We've talked about this a couple of times here throughout the season about kind of like this percussiveness that can happen that the performers want. Like Worst Pies in London, for instance, she's like slapping the bugs and everything like that and rolling the pins and stuff. So she brings a lot of that performance there too, of like extra things besides just the singing. I
think that's very true. I hadn't thought about that until just now, but that rhythm has a very strong echo of the beginning of the Worst Pies in London, of her pounding on the meat.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Just a hurry. Which is the first time she sees him in the show. So that's incredible.
That's right.
He was pretty good, old Steve. he knew what he was doing.
The show is actually kind of well written. The other one, like just talking about things that can have double meanings, of course. My favorite of this first section is "I could eat you up, I really could," which of course, is of course a phrase that you could use for like little kids, even like, "Oh, I could eat you up." But in the context of this show, that is literally what they're doing.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And right before that, in the book scene, there's a really funny joke where she's completely oblivious, which is great. I think that she's either oblivious or she's willfully just willing away like the unsavory, horrific aspects of their life. Because there's a moment where she talks about, he's still saying, "When will the judge come?" And she's like, "Just calm down, take it easy." She goes, "We've got a nice business going," and that gets a huge laugh from the audience, because she's completely just out of it. That doesn't even want to admit it. At least Mr. Sweeney, he's still there. He's brooding, but she's, 100% the other direction. I love that. Yeah, she's not even thinking about eat you up, like what the double meaning of that is.
Well, we'll get to it further into some. It's almost like she's wanting like the franchise out this idea of killing people.
She would. I'm sure she would if she could. She would turn it into McDonald's if she could.
So the song continues on here. This is where kind of the real melody comes in, and she sings, By the sea, Mr. Todd, that's the life I covet. By the sea, Mr. Todd, ooh, I know you'll love it. You and me, Mr. T, we could be alone in a house what we'd almost own down by the sea. Anything you say. Wouldn't that be smashing? With the sea at our gate, we'll have kippered herring. What have swum up the strait from the straits of Bering? Every night in the kip when we're through our kippers, I'll be there slipping off your slippers. By the sea, with the fishies splashing. By the sea, wouldn't that be smashing? Down by the sea. And then Todd keeps going, anything you say, anything you say.
By the sea, Mr. Todd, that's the life I covet. By the sea, Mr. Todd, oh, I know you'd love it. You and me, Mr. T, we could be alone in a house where we'd almost own down by the sea.
Anything you say.
Wouldn't that be smashing? Think I snuck it.
It's interesting the rhyme of Lovett and Mrs. Lovett, which is kind of fun.
I was just going to bring up the same thing. Interesting. I'm actually glad that you brought this up, because in my mind, as soon as she says the word covet, it's like, oh, she's going to rhyme this with like, I'll no longer be Mrs. Lovett or whatever, something like that. Like you think that it's her name that they're going to rhyme. Instead, it's like, I know you to love it. That is what she's rhyming covet with. Yeah. So it's like, oh, it's kind of a different thing, but also like you can kind of see it coming.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. It's just the rhymes are so fun, and straits, the herring that have swum straight from the straits of Bering and kippers. And that's a lot of English talk too, sure. Kippers and all that stuff and slippers. It's just wonderful, and it's very seductive, and she's trying to be seductive. And again, if you see the performance, you see she's really silly and she's playing kind of girly-ish and everything. And it's so fun that he is just not going for it. He just doesn't care.
The interesting part about this section in particular, because I think it only happens one more time, but what Sondheim is doing is like using, I don't know, like a word and then expanding that word. And what I mean by that is like, would have swum to a strait, then from the straits of Bering. So he's using straits, two different versions of strait, but in the same kind of line.
Yeah.
And then every night in the kip when we're through our kippers, like he's kind of using that repetition almost throughout that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the internal rhyme of like, because, it's a straight to the straits of Bering and then kip slipping off your slip, it's incredible. It's just so great and so sweet. And it's such a fun melody too. It's just so darling.
Now, the other thing too, this is, of course, I came at this post 1979. Of course, this wouldn't even been on their minds when they were writing this show. But calling someone Mr. T,
I pity the fool,
just throws me off every time, because it's like, I know who Mr. T is. And that's what I always think about when she says it in the show. Because it's not just this song. She actually says it a couple times throughout the show. And it's like, this is not the A-Team. It almost feels like we're going there.
Although Mr. Sweeney Todd probably pitied many fools who were in his chair.
That's true. That is very true.
Yeah, that's so funny. I hadn't thought of that either. That's true. Does anyone else call Mr. T in the rest of the show? I don't think so. I think it was just
no. Mrs. Lovett does do it a couple of times throughout the show, but she's the only person that I know actually refers to him that way. I say that is what the next revival should be: Mr. T as Sweeney Todd.
That would be good. I'd go see that.
It's a license to print money.
I would go see that for sure.
She continues on saying, I can see us waking, the breakers breaking, the seagulls squawking, hoo, I do me baking, then I go walking with you who, I'll warm me bones on the esplanade, have tea and scones with me gay young blade, then I'll knit a sweater while you write a letter, unless we got better to do who.
I can see us waking, the breakers breaking, the seagulls squawking, I do me baking, then I go walking with you. I warm me bones on the esplanade, have tea and scones with me gay young blade, then I'll knit a sweater while you write a letter, unless we got better to do.
Anything you say.
Well, here's where I see a lot of the, double meaning, gruesome, like bones is a good one. And even calling him the gay young blade is great. It's just warm my bones. And, in about half an hour stage time, she'll be warming her bones in the oven, so even just the bones part is gruesome, but the warming the bones is double.
Absolutely. I think what we're getting into here is definitely using slang terms to have those double meanings. Like they're referring to a person, of course, but also kind of talking about the action in the show as well. The gay young blade line honestly threw me down a rabbit hole of looking stuff up. Because I understood it instinctively what she's talking about is like this rogue man or like this roguish man I want to be walking next to. And even like the slang term would be like they're a dashing young gentleman. And that's all fine and good. But at least in the original production, I don't know if you could really call Sweeney Todd a gay young man.
No, certainly not.
So that's where things get weird. And I think why there's some forums out there that I came across. It's like, oh, she's actually talking about Toby in this scene. I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I don't see that at all.
No
but
way.
like, yeah.
I think
but it's still funny that she's calling Sweeney a gay young
I think
blade.
that's still part of like this her delusional way of thinking of them as being young and yeah, he's sitting there like staring at this pipe and like, you know, where's the judge? Where's the beetle? You know, and she's like, oh, we're gonna have a wonderful time together. Yeah. So I think she's still like infantilizing both of them in a way, or making them seem like they're 20 somethings, like just kids in love when they're both in their middle ages and have been murdering people. I think it's all just a delusional thinking on her part.
She's still thinking of him like pre-going to Australia, basically.
Yeah.
Is how I look at that.
I think you're right. I think that's, I mean, she talks about how she was in love with him then when he was just Benjamin Barker, you know, 15 or 20 years ago. So yeah, she's clearly had a crush on him then, even I guess when her husband was alive. She talks later in this book scene about how long it's been since her husband died, Mr. Lovett. But I think she still had she had a thing for him then, even, you know, she had a thing for Sweeney or Benjamin.
Oh, last thing I was going to say, I love also her like yoo-hoo things that she does throughout this. I find that every actress likes to do these in a slightly different way, and some of them will like really lean in to saying it. But however you want to interpret that, it's fun. It's a fun little acting moment you can choose to do.
Yeah, and it's very sweet. I mean, it's all so neat and perfect because it goes like hoo-hoo and then yoo-hoo, and then the way she does which is being coy, you know, being sexually suggestive, and we got better to do.
That's right.
You know, it just it makes perfect sense, and every moment works.
Yeah, I think, I know we've mentioned this a couple of times, but I think it's good to underscore the fact that part of the joke of this song is not just the lyrics, but the fact that Mrs. Lovett, who is not like ancient, but is like past her 20s and 30s, let's just say, is really trying to like flaunt herself and like be attractive and stuff like that, but also like garishly painted in the face is usually how she's portrayed. So it's like that's part of the joke, is like, why are you trying to act so coy and demure?
Yeah, I mean, she certainly has the hots for him, and you know, and wants to seal the deal. I wonder, I mean, I believe there's no indication of it in the play. Like by the end of Act 1, you know, it's now a little bit of time later. I guess they're in a relationship. I guess they're being romantic occasionally or having sex of some kind. I imagine you could read it like now she's still trying to get that to happen. You know, I don't know.
And I will say that's how I read it, just based on some lyrics that are going to come up here. But definitely, I think she's trying to advance the relationship quicker.
For sure.
So she continues on saying, think how snug it'll be underneath our flannel when it's just you and me and the English Channel in our cozy retreat kept all neat and tidy. We'll have chums over every Friday by the sea. Anything you say. Don't you love the weather? By the sea. We'll grow old together. By the seaside, hoo-hoo, by the beautiful sea.
Think how snug it'll be underneath our flannel when it's just you and me and the English Channel in our cozy retreat kept all neat and tidy. We'll have chums over every Friday by the sea. Don't you love the weather? By the sea. We'll grow old together by the seaside, by the beautiful sea.
It's just a similar kind of foreshadowing of like we'll grow old together and all these things that aren't going to happen, you know.
All this stuff that she's infusing into the relationship for sure.
And you're right. I mean, she's definitely suggesting that they get away, and she's envisioning some grand romantic weekend, and you know. She definitely wants more than he wants out of the relationship.
I'm just going to stay out here. I love the fact that he decided how to rhyme flannel with English Channel. I think that's really
fantastic.
fun.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's just all works. It's incredible.
Here's the part that I think deserves some deeper discussion. So she says, it'll be so quiet that who'll come by it except a seagull who, we shouldn't try it though till it's legal for two, who, but a seaside wedding could be devised, me rumpled bedding legitimized, my eyelids'll flutter, I'll turn into butter the moment I mutter I do, who.
It'll be so quiet that who'll come by it except a seagull. Oh, oh, we shouldn't try it though till it's legal for two. But a seaside wedding could be devised, me rumpled bedding legitimized, me eyelids that flutter, I'll turn into butter the moment I mutter I do.
Here's my opinion on this. Because I've actually looked at other people who actually see it in a bit of a different way.
Sure.
But for me, this, proves or suggests that they have not had sex yet. Because she says, like, we basically can't marry or can't, pursue this relationship until we're actually married.
Right.
So, like, we shouldn't try it, though, until it's legal for two. That is what she's saying. So don't come into my bed until it's legal for the both of us to actually have sex, which is, I think, an extra bit of hilarious to this. And I don't know if it would be even caught, because it's like, she's being this upstanding Christian woman, but still baking people into meat pies.
Right.
Like, it's just like this weird thing that she's drawing the line at.
But then I would also say in the very next verse, she says, a wedding could be devised, my rumpled bedding legitimized. That makes me feel like they have
Right.
rumpled bedding right now, so that it's not legitimized. So I think you could read it either way you like, I think. But that's the way I tend to look at it, is that they're still doing stuff, but she feels like, I mean, it certainly was frowned upon by polite society, to have premarital sex. So I definitely think there's an argument for either way. But that's how I would interpret it. That
maybe she allows him to touch her like over the flannel, but never under the flannel. She's still she needs to upkeep appearances.
But I would imagine that their romantic moments are particularly passionate. I think he might just be the same kind of anything you say kind of stuff going on between them there. Well,
just the saddest sex scene you could imagine is Sweeney Todd making love, I think.
I think that she throws himself on him, and he's sort of the extent of like anything you say, or he's thinking about,
whatever.
Some people say they think about other things. He's still thinking about the judge.
This is a callback that will call out my age. He's basically the Al Bundy of musical theater.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, Al had some. I could see him killing some people. I'll say. Well, also here's another one. Another pre-gruesome image that seems okay on the A side, which is she's saying I'll turn it into butter, because that's again like suggesting melting, and
that's true. Well, here's the other thing. Another guest actually asked me this question. That's all I can think of actually now, which is there's this conversation we're having is like, do Mrs. Lovett and Sweeney Todd have sex? And you can have that conversation. I think the more like devilish question to ask is like, do you think they eat the meat pies?
Wow, that is such a great question that I've never thought. I would have to say no. I would have to say no, because they know it's in there.
Right.
I would guess not. But I think you could certainly interpret it if you wanted to do a production or whatever you wanted to do. You could certainly interpret it both ways. So you could see a scene where they're sitting there finishing one off. I would guess probably not, but I don't know. Ooh, that would be
they're
really...
still eating the cats, maybe.
Yeah. Or maybe, I wonder if she makes some, because even in this scene, she talks about how, there can't be an infinite supply of people.
True.
She talks
right,
about in the book scene again, that's not in the song, but she talks about how they've been very careful to only knock off people that seem to be alone or to have families or whatever. So I don't know how many pies you get out of that. Maybe someone somewhere has already written a scholarly paper on that. How many meat pies you could get out of a person.
I'm sure someone has done the math. Like, this is how many people per week, per month you actually need to kill in order for this business to make money.
But I wonder if like on The Sopranos, let's say, you got your legitimate business and you've got the legitimate garbage collecting. If she still makes a few regular ones, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is how the song wraps up here. She says, by the sea in our nest, we could share our kippers with the odd paying guest from the weekend trippers. Have a nice sunny suite for the guest to rest in. Now and then you could do the guest in by the sea, married nice and proper. By the sea, bring along your chopper. to the seaside hoo-hoo by the beautiful sea. At the end of the day, I understand like the real purpose of this song is to show like Mrs. Lovett wants to marry Sweeney Todd. Like that is essentially what the purpose of this song is. It still kind of kills me that in the movie version they cut out my favorite line, which is now and then you can do the guest in, because I just think that's a great laugh line.
Did? See,
yeah. At least in the recording of it, I guess I haven't watched the movie for a bit, but I listened to it today.
I'm going to do a quote from another old movie from the 80s.
Sure.
There's a movie called Johnny Dangerously. Do you remember that movie at all with Michael Keaton?
Yeah.
And there was a character in that called Joe, played by Joe Piscopo, who was his crazy brother. And he said, he goes, guy Welsh on a bet on me once, like that, you know? So I'm going to say like, I watched the movie of Sweeney Todd once.
Sure.
I can't stand that movie. I'm usually a big fan of Tim Burton. Johnny Depp was always a good actor. I went to see that movie in the theater and I was excited to see it because I love Sweeney Todd, but then I just like, whoa.
I don't know if you read this little footnote that Sondheim puts into this, but he was very pleased the fact that chopper, what he just meant for like the razors, is slang for penis in the UK. So it was an extra little bit of double entendre.
Wow. That's a good one then, yeah.
So he didn't mean that when he originally wrote the lyric, but it's just a really great thing that it does mean that.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's fun that this is the end of the song, so that's where it gets the most gruesome and talking about killing the guests and everything, and do the guest in and bring along a chopper. It's great that she still thinks that, you know, she's got his needs in mind. she knows what'll make him happy. It's not necessarily snuggling under the flannel, but having a chance to knock someone off with his razor. So that's nice of her. She's thinking about him.
I think ultimately what's great about this is that it's doing a few different things, right? It is that last little bit of reprieve before like the real gruesome stuff happens within this show, or at least the darkest stuff happens within this show. It's a great character moment for Mrs. Lovett. We see what she's really striving for. Like this is really her North Star in this. And it's a pretty little song. It's like just a fun little ditty that you can hum here as well. But I guess for you, Mike, like if we look at the entire score, if we look at the entirety of Sweeney Todd, would this be, say, like top 5, middle 5, bottom 5? Like where would you kind of rank this?
Wait, well, it's such a magnificent score. So they're all amazing. But I'd have to guess I'd say I'd have to put it at the top of the bottom 5. Only in that it's a perfectly fine song. It's very funny, as we just said. It's very well written. It's fun to see performed, but it in terms of the rest of the score, and it has its it's like a little, I was going to say after dinner mint, but it's not even that. It's like a little amuse-bouche or whatever, like a little thing you have while you're waiting for the rest of the meal to come out. So, I mean, to be in the bottom 5 of Sweeney Todd is still better. It would be in the top 5 of anything else. But yeah, that's where I would sort of put it, because I think it's in a way forgettable. I know the show is very, very long, and I know it's definitely a spotlight piece for the actress playing Mrs. Lovett. But in many ways, you could cut it, and nothing would change in terms of the story. Like,
fully change. Not that I've ever done much for like performing and stuff like that, but I wonder if this would be a good audition song for certain roles you wanted to go in for, just to show comedy timing, that sort of thing. So. I feel like you could use it.
Yeah, it's definitely a good little number for that. It's funny to see too, like there's a couple of instances of Angela Lansbury doing it, and it seemed like she got a little bigger each time. Like if you watch that YouTube from 1979, early in the run, she's doing it. And then the version with George Hearn is from LA from a year or so later, and she's getting a little bigger now. And then a year after that, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but the 1981 Tony Awards, have you seen that clip?
I don't know if I have, actually.
The 1981 Tony Awards.
Because they do this. Do they do this song?
Yes. It was one of those years when there weren't a whole lot of new shows to give awards to. So I think they kind of juiced the Tonys by, let's have these people come in. And so they made up this thing, and the theme of it was like women or something. And
I remember
they had this thing where they had Priscilla Lopez sing What We Did for Love from a chorus line, Andrew McCardle sing Tomorrow from Annie. And it was like they said something like the last 5 best musical shows are still running which Sweeney Todd wasn't running by this point when the Tony Awards came on, but that was weird too.
Right.
And then they had thing from Dreamgirls, and then they had her. And so she came out and sang it with this guy who's just a guy dressed like Sweeney. It's very strange if you want to see it, because I feel bad for the poor guy. He's sitting there in full costume as Sweeney Todd and doing anything you say, but he's just a guy. Even when I watched it at the time, I was like, he's just some guy they hired, a nice actor. Maybe he was the understudy for George Hearn or something.
Right? Yeah,
but he had nothing to do. But anyway, but then even in that, like that's more of a performance. It's not part of the play, so she's just sort of doing it, and she was even bigger. And
yeah, I just looked it up here too. Like, there's another podcast I listened to that they play this game. It's like, what if this show had come out the year after? And it's like in '79, not giving it to Sweeney Todd would have been like the shocking thing, because you have a show called Ballroom, which I have never heard of. I don't know what that is.
That was based on a movie. That was based on a TV movie that was called Queen of the Stardust Ballroom, that starred Charles Durning and Maureen Stapleton, and it was about like an middle-aged couple who meet like ballroom dancing and fall in love.
Gotcha. The Neil Simon, Marvin Hamlish, they're playing Our Song.
I know that show.
And then The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. Those are the three that came out the same year. The following year is Evita. So that would have been an interesting thing, like if Sweeney Todd and Evita had been going up against each other, how they would have squared that.
So that was Evita. Right. Okay, right. So, because I'm a big fan of 42nd Street, and that opened in like August or so of 1980, so that it was too late for the 1980 Tony Awards, but that's what it won the Tony for Best Musical in 1981. I was a stage manager many years ago for a production of They're Playing Our Song, so I know that show very, very well. It's fun. It's a fun show.
That's fun.
Yeah.
So, Mike, thank you so much for joining me here today. This is the time where you can tell people where they can find you online, and maybe what some of your projects are that people can tune in for.
Sure. Well, my online, I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is all one word, Mike Price in LA. And I always do the standard disclaimer of like, I chose this 13 years ago when I started Twitter. I wish I had thought of it closer to it. But anyway, that's where it is. And I mostly tweet, you may have already said, but I'm one of the writers and producers on The Simpsons. So I'll tweet a lot about The Simpsons on there, and occasionally my own stuff. And The Simpsons is still going strong. We'll be back for the next season, the fall season 34 in the fall. I don't know when this is going to run on your podcast, but there's an episode that'll be our last episode of the season, which will air May 22nd.
This might be the week after that.
Okay, well then it'll be on Hulu then if you missed it. But
okay, great.
It's the season finale with a spectacular, big, probably the longest musical number ever on The Simpsons that runs almost 11 minutes long, performed by Tony Award winner and nominee Hugh Jackman. So nice. It's an absolutely spectacular episode with this huge number. Hugh Jackman plays this character who is teaching Bart some things about economics of all things, but it's really, really great. So I'm excited about that.
I was actually going to ask like your next musical episode, so that answers that question here too.
Yeah, well, I just had anyone out there can watch these shows on Hulu. An episode I wrote was just recently on, and that one I got to work with, and we did a song with John Lithgow, who was unbelievably nice and sweet, and sang this really fun parody of the song from Willy Wonka, Pure Imagination from Willy Wonka.
Awesome.
So it was great.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I am. And then my Netflix show, Officer Family, still exists on Netflix, even though we're finished our run. But the show will be on Netflix for a number of years, as long as Netflix is still in business.
Until Disney buys it, basically.
That's right. So until Disney buys it. That's right.
Okay. Well, last thing here then. This is the toughest question that I've been asking people this season. Mike, what is your favorite pie?
Oh, apple pie. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Standard apple pie.
Standard apple pie with the kind of like crumbly, cinnamon crumbly crust. Yes.
Do you do ice cream or no ice cream?
No, I don't usually do ice cream. That, and it's also apple, is the, and this is going back in time. You have to go to a time machine, but it was the hot apple pies that McDonald's used to make like 30 years ago. But they were really hot and deep fried and
yes,
incredible.
They were very different like 20 years ago. Although in my weakest moments, I will still DoorDash or Uber Eats the 2 apple pies to my house. I'm like, this is a waste of money and gas, but I'm hungry. So
yeah. And the last thing I'll say in terms, now you got me about pie, is the other kind of like are they're called Hostess pies, which are, I think, I don't know if they're available all over the country or just in the East Coast.
Little chocolate things?
No, they're like a little tart Hostess fruit pie. So it's like a little piece of dough, almost like a donut style of dough that's like a little pita pocket almost that has apple stuff in it. It's great.
That's great. All perfect recommendations.
And
Perfect.
pizza
Thanks,
pie.
Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, pizza.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. You can send emails to puttingittogetherpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow Sondheim Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And you can support the show on Patreon by going to patreon.com/puttingittogetherpodcast. Thank you to the Alberta Podcast Network, to Alberta Blue Cross, and to Park Power this week. Putting It Together is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts from. Consider subscribing so that you never miss an episode. Next week, we'll be talking about the song Not While I'm Around. I also one day hope to trick somebody into loving me so much that they excuse my murderous tendencies. As always, a big thank you to the great Chris Taniguchi, who designed the podcast artwork, and Nick Driscoll for composing our theme music. Well, we've reached the end of our episode. Yes, I know. Goodbye for now.